Hello, welcome to Break Room. Welcome back. Today I'm talking about 3 different levers in your career that you actually can control versus the things that we can't control. I have a lot of women that I work with, professionals that come to me and want to control everything. And that is going to be extremely draining, but also it's going to lead you in the wrong directions to focus on the things that you can't control. So let's bring it back to the things that we can control. Today, I'm talking about 3 different things, and that is skills and how you're going to show up and control that. I'm also going to talk about visibility, something a lot of people really don't talk about in their career until they're further down the line. But I think you can have visibility at any point in your career. This isn't something you hold on until you reach a certain year or threshold in your career. And then the last is relationships, probably my favorite because it's how I've developed my career, but it's also very meaningful when you start to really build those relationships. So let's get started. The first one I'm going to talk a little bit more about are really the skills and how you create your craft. The biggest thing with creating your craft is I want you to focus on what is your most measurable value? What is your biggest impact in your career? Whether you're looking for a job or if you're in a current role right now, you really need to hone in on this again early on, because if you are starting off your career, whether you're 1 year in or 10 years in, and you are constantly trying to find the skill, trying to grow in too many areas, then you are taking your eyes off of what you're good at. So I want you to think, if I left my job tomorrow, how could I make it so tough to backfill me that I am truly bringing the top of my skills? It might be if you're in marketing that you have a keen eye for certain content, or if you're on the back end of digital or analytics, what are you doing about your role that is contributing to the business line that they need you so much that honestly AI can't replace? A lot of times this is around storytelling. This is around influence. This is around presence, emotional, intelligent qualities that you can bring, that is going to be hard to replace. Again, I want you to think about, your last 6 months of work, your last year, your last 2. Think back to when you have had the most impact and why. And I'm going to pause there because that is where I want to leave you to think about from how to hone in on your craft and your skill. So that is lever 1 in what you can control in your career. The second lever is visibility. So what we say by visibility is it doesn't mean you have to be in the board meetings. It doesn't mean you really have to be in every meeting. I actually read an article the other day that said most strategic business decisions are not made in a board meeting. They are not made in big meetings. They are often made in other instances where people are debriefing or formulating the ideas or brainstorming together in smaller groups versus these big visible meetings, right? Sometimes those are more for just recaps versus making decisions. Sometimes you're just in a meeting with one person and you both are like, oh my gosh, I had this idea. Let's move on this, right? So I want you to remove that visibility equals a boardroom, whether that's virtual or in person. Instead, I want you to think about what exposure with leadership, with teams, with peers is really important to allow you to showcase what you're really good at. And so what I want to focus on is like promotions rarely only go to the person that is doing everything on their checklist. Promotions often go to performers that have this uncapped potential, that really get the culture and that can kind of take risks and stand out. It isn't always the person that has everything checked off on, their to-do list or emails. So when it comes to visibility, I want you to think about this. I'll give an example. How do you create that, right? If you are in a position where you're like, Britt, I am at a huge company and is red tape everywhere. I can't be in this meeting because that is the directors or executives, and I can't be in this meeting. Okay, stop thinking about meetings as visibility. What can you do in your job to start to stand out so that people really start listening to you? It might just be that you are raising your hand to respond to, a project. It might be that you're speaking in meetings very clearly and you're changing a perception. It could be super simple like that. It might be that you're sending monthly impact reports or you are being proactive. I want to highlight that word if you're listening to this. Proactiveness is immeasurable in your career. It means that someone is not telling you do ABC. Your boss is not directing you to do this exact project. And when you complete that and they're like, great, good job, you're like, well, I did everything they told me. Yes, but you were told to do that. I want you to start thinking, how can I create something to have an impact and to stand out that has not been given to me and that I can be proactive on? So that visibility, again, it could just be speaking up, presenting, or again, get involved. The biggest thing that I did in my past career was getting involved in a lot of big companies have ERGs, which is an employee resource group. These are an amazing place to start to showcase your leadership, especially early on in your career. When I started at L'Oreal, I was a manager, not a lot of leadership at all. And I got heavily involved in, it was called the Wellness Innovation Squad. Shout out to you all if that's still going. But that opened doors for me to meet more people and show up as a leader, and what started to pave the way for my confidence and the foundational growth for myself and my career. It was not that I was doing amazing in my full-time job. I just kind of found this side passion that I opened the doors there. So ERGs are big. Any type of extra volunteer work or project that you could get involved with. Maybe it's some type of event that you typically don't help out with and you're raising your hand for it. Again, just to be visible and help out. So I'm rattling off ideas for you, and I want you to leave this podcast episode with an idea of how you can be more visible in your career. The third lever that you absolutely have control over are relationships. This is everything. If I could put a foundational blanket statement around your career, it's build relationships, and that will change so much. Hard work is really great, and that can create a brand for you, an opportunity, but relationships really accelerate your career, and they also create meaning, which then oftentimes gives people more motivation to make it through more resilient times. For instance, if you are one of the millions of people right now impacted by layoffs, this is a prime example of something you can control, are your relationships in your community. I have a client, an amazing client. I will have her later on in the podcast because I think what she's doing is phenomenal. She has really taken her hands off the applicant steering wheel and solely leaned into her relationships from her MBA program. Prime example of how that can open way more doors, and people are more apt to listen to you, understand your potential versus just seeing what you've done on your resume. And beyond job searching. So when I look back in my career, I think the biggest, again, game changer was that I built relationships, but in a very meaningful way that didn't have a end goal. And what I mean by that, I just truly wanted to get to know people that I connected with. Look, you're not going to connect with everyone. And so if you are looking to quote unquote build a relationship with a leader only because they're a leader, you're building your relationships in a wrong way. You want to focus on the people that give you the energy that you feel comfortable with, right? Gosh, there's so many people in my career that have been either at my job or I've met at an event or LinkedIn or networking. I have some great people in my career that I've never even met. Shout out, you know who you are. Literally, I think we've met on Instagram or LinkedIn, and we've continued to touch base. Those are the relationships that are meaningful, and they tend to open up more opportunities for you that you aren't maybe seeing right now, but that will be so valuable. It's not only something that could add value to your professional life, but your personal life, right? Having conversations with people that are actually listening and actually care and provide feedback. Some of the best relationships I have in my career kind of support circle are people that are blatantly very honest with me and can call me out. An example, I tend to be a person that is all or nothing. Sometimes I can be fully in and I go 150%. If something happens and there's a hiccup, sometimes I just throw my hands up and I'm like, nope, I'm done. And I do have people call me out on that are like, wait, you gave up. Get get back on board, right? So I want to also emphasize people that you want to build a relationship with are also just honest, transparent. And how to do this. The how of building relationships is go about it with curiosity. Ask a lot of questions. Do not just talk about yourself. I think the people that I built relationships with first, or like throughout my career that I stayed in touch with, it's because I just asked a lot of questions of like, how did you end up here? What was that? What was that challenge? Talk about those real things, right? And that can build from there. And if you want to give yourself a goal, try for once a month to have a coffee chat virtually or in person with someone. That's it. Once a month is not a lot. And honestly, as a mom of two, make time for these talks almost every week. You don't have to do that, but it's something that gives me a lot of boost in my day to just sit down with someone and really talk with them. So overall, again, these three areas in your career, you can control. You can put the time into it, the thought, the creativity, all that other stuff in your career, being passed up for promotions, being laid off, struggling to find a job, feeling stuck. These things oftentimes are out of our control, and they're business decisions, and they are about luck and the market and these greater things that we can't always see. So knowing that, take a step back this week, this month, and this quarter to really align on these three levers. I really think like there's sometimes we feel stuck. It's because we're trying to do everything and be everything. And that is when you have to stop and actually realign and do less and narrow in on your focus of what you're working on. So I love this topic. I think what we can control and what we can't is a very complex, but also a very simple entity in itself in our career. And we so often are not focused on the things we can control. So come back to that ground, focus on your skill, that visibility, and those relationships. It really, really will turn into a lot of different areas of growth for you. And I'm really excited to hopefully hear feedback from you and how this all went. And I thank you for stopping by today and listening to my podcast episode. Please continue to follow along with me on LinkedIn. A lot of content out there. I'm also putting a note here that I started a new Substack newsletter for juggling moms who are trying to do it all. So be sure to subscribe to that. I'm talking more career and parental advice on that newsletter. So thank you so much and see you next week.